They tried to push me off the cliff for the insurance money, but they forgot about the climber's camera. I had lived in that house for 12 years, but somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like home. Cedar Hill was my true home, the house I had owned for more than 3 decades, but I had given it up temporarily to help Caleb when he said his family needed me. It felt more like a waiting room, where everyone hoped I would quietly disappear. Every morning, I woke up before anyone else and sat in the kitchen trying not to make a sound, afraid that Roxanne would come down the stairs and glare at me the way she usually did, as if I had stolen something from her by breathing. She never missed an opportunity to remind me what an inconvenience I was. The worst part was her voice, sharp and crisp and cold, saying things she knew I would carry with me all day. You limp because you are old, Donna, not because you worked. Stop fishing for sympathy. Some of us actually have responsibilities. She spoke like my 40 years as a nurse, standing on stiff floors until my bones screamed, had been some silly hobby instead of the work that paid for the roof over her head. My knees had given out long before my pride did, but when I asked if we could install a simple railing, Roxanne said, "Why bother? She is barely going to last 10 more years." Caleb said nothing. He rarely did anymore. He had learned how to let her talk for both of them, and I watched him shrink into her opinions the way people sink into soft chairs, because it is easier than standing up. To keep the peace, I stayed quiet. When she scolded me for using the toilet too often, I stopped drinking as much water, even though the doctor told me hydration could help my joints. I never flushed unless I absolutely had to, because she would bang on the door and shout about the water bill, as if each drop came from her veins. That day I held it so long my stomach cramped, but the fear of waking her outweighed my discomfort. It was humiliating, but I did it anyway. I always did. That night, the pain in my bladder became unbearable. I eased my feet into my slippers and opened my bedroom door slowly enough that the hinges would not squeal. I walked gently, favoring my right knee, letting the wall hold some of my weight. When I passed by Caleb and Roxanne's room, I noticed the door was cracked open. The hallway light barely touched the carpet, but their voices slipped out clearly, crisp as paper-cutting skin. Roxanne whispered first, low but vicious, the way she always sounded when she thought the world belonged to her. $90,000, Caleb, that is how deep we are. Do you understand? 90,000. He muttered something, but she didn't let him finish. And she is sitting on money we could use. Insurance does not pay unless the death is accidental. Hiking accidents happen all the time. I froze. My breath caught in the back of my throat. I leaned ever so slightly toward the doorway, praying the old wood under my heel would not betray me. Then I heard her say it, the sentence that stiffened every muscle in my frail, tired body. One push, that is all it takes. She cannot fight back. She can barely walk. My chest tightened, and a sharp wave of heat shot through my face. For a moment I could not tell if it was fear or heartbreak. Then I realized it was both. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. But even in that terror, a small voice inside me whispered that the truth must be heard by someone, by anyone. Caleb answered her in a voice that sounded nothing like the boy I raised. She has been dead weight for years. I am tired of pretending everything is fine. We take her on the trip, you distract her, and I finish it. No one will question it. People her age fall all the time. My hand rose to my mouth, not to hush myself, but because my jaw trembled. I wanted to believe I heard wrong. I wanted to think they were talking about someone else. But the truth was there in the way they said she. Never Mom, never Donna, never anything that resembled a human being. I took one step back, and the edge of my slipper caught the corner of the hallway rug. The soft scrape was barely audible, but it was enough. The talking stopped, their door swung open wider, and Caleb appeared. His expression was not shock, not concern, but irritation, as if I had interrupted a television show he enjoyed. "What are you doing up?" he asked. His tone was flat and cold. Nothing in him belonged to the son who once clung to my hand when thunderstorms scared him. I needed the bathroom, I said, and my voice cracked like thin ice under weight. Behind him, Roxanne smiled, not kindly, not even politely. It was the smile a person uses when they realize their prey is cornered. Caleb stepped closer. "This weekend," he said, "the three of us are going hiking. Me, you, and Roxanne. You are going. I do not care how your knees feel." His jaw tightened. "Laurel has her school trip, so she will not be with us. It is a family weekend. You do not get to refuse." My throat tightened. My knees throbbed. "Something inside me splintered," I whispered. "I do not think I can." He cut me off. "You are going." I nodded, because disobeying him felt too dangerous. But as I walked toward the bathroom, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I had just heard my own death being planned by the very people I once loved more than anything. And they believed I was too old, too weak, too worn down to stop them. They had no idea how wrong they were. I spent most of the night awake after hearing the pieces of their plan, staring at the ceiling in the dark while my knees throbbed in dull, pulsing waves. Pain was nothing new to me. I had pushed through far worse in my years at the hospital, but tonight it carried a different weight. It reminded me of everything I had endured, everything I had given, and everything that had slowly been twisted into ammunition against me. People like to say resentment needs a reason, but in my house, resentment had learned to grow without one. Sometimes resentment only needs an audience, and Roxanne had become the loudest one in the house. Her dislike for me began long before the debts or the marriage troubles. It started with something as simple as me refusing to pay off their credit card balance years ago. They had blown through thousands on vacations, gadgets, and nights out, then came to me with open palms, expecting me to fix it like a nurse bandaging a scrape. When I said no, Caleb stared at me as if I had betrayed him. Roxanne spat out the words, "selfish old woman," as if she had been waiting to use them. I explained that I wanted them to learn responsibility, that solving the problem for them would only make it worse, but they did not want to hear it. From that day on, every mistake they made was somehow my fault. Then there was the house in Cedar Hill. My house. The one I bought after 3 decades of double shifts and holiday hours. The one where I had cared for patients who had no one else. The one place that still felt like mine. Roxanne hated that house. She claimed it looked like a shrine to the poor, a reminder that I had worked low-class jobs. Her words, not mine. She mocked the wallpaper, the creaking floors, the porch swing that my husband built before he passed. "You cling to that place like it is all you have ever been," she once said. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was the only place I felt seen. But instead of understanding that, she used it to belittle me further. Even the way I lived became fuel for her anger. I turned off lights when I left a room. I washed dishes by hand to save the dishwasher cycles. I unplugged appliances we did not use. I had lived through years where a single dollar meant something, so frugality stayed with me, not out of fear but habit. But Roxanne told everyone at her book club that my habits made the house feel like a mausoleum. One evening she said loud enough for me to hear, "I swear she is preparing us for her funeral with how dead this place feels." Caleb never defended me. In fact, his silence hardened over the years. His shame ran deep, and I could feel it even when he did not speak. He despised that his mother had been a nurse who worked herself ragged, while he struggled to hold a job longer than 8 months. My sacrifices, which had once been a badge of honor in his eyes, became a stain he wanted to wash away. The harder life pressed on him, the more he blamed me for the shape of his own failures. My knees were the worst of it. 40 years of lifting patients, bracing falls, and standing through emergencies take a toll. Some nights the joints felt like they were filled with burning sand. I rubbed ointment to ease the ache, but the smell bothered Roxanne. "You crawl around here like a sluggish turtle," she mocked, "and that awful medicated stink follows you everywhere." When I apologized, she rolled her eyes and told me that apologies do not fix what is broken, and I realized she meant me. The real wound, though, was hearing how she spoke about me to Laurel. I loved that child more than I had the words to express. She saw me, really saw me, with the kind of unfiltered kindness only children possess. One afternoon, I heard Caleb tell her, "Do not grow up to be like your grandmother. She has nothing to show for all her years." Laurel ran to her room crying, and I sat on the stairwell gripping the rail, trying to breathe through the ache spreading across my chest. I wanted to tell Caleb that my life had meant something, that patience lived because I stayed awake when others slept, that colleagues trusted me, that he had once trusted me too. But the words died before they reached my mouth. It is hard to defend yourself when the people you raised no longer believe you are worth defending. That night, sitting on the edge of my bed after hearing their whispered plot, a cold truth settled over me. They did not hate me for any wrong I had done. They hated me because my kindness, my sacrifices, my discipline exposed everything they lacked. They twisted my best qualities into flaws, reshaping me into a villain they could safely blame. As that truth took root, something shifted inside me. Their hatred came not from my failures, but from their fear and greed. And in that realization, painful yet clarifying, a quiet strength began to rise, something I had not felt in years: resolve. Caleb barely spoke to me the morning after I overheard their plan, but he did not have to. His silence carried the same weight as a threat. When I tried to tell him that my knees were too swollen to manage a long hike, that maybe I should stay home and rest, he did not even look up from his coffee. "If you do not go," he said, his voice low and clipped, "you can take care of yourself from now on." He tapped his finger on the table as if punctuating the sentence. "No more rides, no more meals, no more roof over your head." He finally lifted his eyes, and there was nothing soft left in them. "You are going." I nodded because I had learned that resistance only made him crueler. Even if I escaped the hike, where would I go? Cedar Hill was still mine legally, but I did not have a car, nor the strength to walk far. I stayed quiet, thinking of Laurel. She had left early for her school camping trip, hugging me tightly before she climbed into the bus. "I will miss you, Grandma," she had said. The truth was, I wished she were here, because if she came, Caleb and Roxanne would have had to keep their masks on. But she was gone for 2 days, just long enough for them to plan my absence. We left mid-morning. Caleb tossed a backpack into the trunk with more force than necessary, as if annoyed that it weighed more than he expected. Roxanne waved me toward the back seat but had piled 2 coolers and a bag of gear where my legs would have gone. "Just squeeze in," she said without glancing back. "You do not need that much space." She slid into the passenger seat and angled it so far back that it pressed against my knees. A sharp bolt of pain shot upward, and I bit down on my tongue to keep from reacting. Caleb pulled out of the driveway with a jerk. The road out of town was smooth at first, but he took the turns sharply, and each sway sent pressure into my aching joints. Roxanne leaned her head against the window, pretending not to notice. After a few miles, she finally spoke. Not to be kind, but to provoke. "Hope your legs hold up, Donna," she said, her voice light, almost cheerful. "These trails can get rough, but if you cannot keep up, well, too bad." I stared out the window, trying to steady my breathing. The pain was manageable. The fear was not. Every mile felt like another step toward something I could not stop. I thought of Laurel's small hands gripping my sweater the night before she left, of how she whispered, "I love you, Grandma." It was that memory that made me agree to the trip. I did not want Laurel returning from school to a home torn apart. I wanted her to feel safe a little longer. But the farther we drove, the more Caleb's behavior shifted. His grip tightened on the wheel until his knuckles went white, then he would force his shoulders to relax, as if remembering the role he was supposed to play. He kept checking the rearview mirror not to look at me, but as though he was tracking something only he understood. When Roxanne touched his arm, he flinched before forcing a hollow smile. I recognized that look. It was the look of a man bracing himself to do something unforgivable. I adjusted my knees and glanced outside just in time to see a small body camera tumble from a hiker's backpack and roll into the grass. For a moment, the sunlight flashed off the metal clip like a warning. I could not explain why, but it chilled me. Everything, the silence, the rushed departure, Their stiff tension felt orchestrated for one terrible purpose. Roxanne turned around suddenly and caught me staring out the window. "You look nervous," she said, her lips curling into a half-smile. "There is nothing to worry about. We will take good care of you." Her voice wrapped around the words in a way that made them feel poisoned. Caleb cleared his throat. "We are almost there." The closer we came to the trailhead, the more agitated he grew. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, then stopped abruptly when he noticed me watching. He gave a short laugh, hollow and forced. "Just excited for the fresh air," he muttered. "Long week." Roxanne nudged him lightly. "Relax. It will all be over soon." She said it softly, almost lovingly, but the words struck me like a shove between the shoulder blades. My heart pounded, my breath shrinking as the truth finally settled. Whatever they planned, they believed they could do it cleanly, that no one would question them, that I was already fading, too slow and too weak to survive. When the car turned onto the gravel road, I saw Caleb's jaw tighten, his eyes fixed not on the scenery but on the drop-offs ahead. Fear took shape beside me, like a living thing. My son was not taking me on a family outing. He was taking me to die. The wind hit my face the moment I stepped out of the car, sharp and unsettled, carrying the kind of chill that makes a person instinctively brace themselves. Caleb slammed the trunk shut, while Roxanne yanked her backpack onto her shoulders. She turned toward me with a wide, artificial smile. "Come on, Donna. Stretch those knees. You do not want to slow us down already." I tried to step forward carefully, but she swooped in as if to steady me. Her hand closed around my arm, and she pushed me upward with an extra force that jammed my knee at the wrong angle. Pain shot through me like fire, and I pitched forward, barely catching myself on a boulder. She let out a soft laugh. "Oops. You wobble too easily." Caleb did not even look back. The trail forked into 3 paths, one clearly marked for beginners, one moderate, and one marked with a red warning sign for loose rock and steep drop-offs. Without hesitation, Caleb started walking toward the red trail. My stomach tightened. "Caleb," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "that one looks dangerous. Could we take a different route instead?" He paused just long enough for Roxanne to answer in his place. "We want a little challenge. And you need exercise." She gestured up the narrow path. "If you fall behind, try harder." The wind picked up, whistling through the pine branches like a warning. My knee throbbed from the earlier shove, and every shift of weight made the joint feel hotter. Still, I followed. I had no choice. About 30 minutes in, the trail narrowed until we were walking single file. The rock surface was uneven, tilting slightly downward toward a steep slope on the right side. I heard Caleb whisper behind Roxanne, his voice low but not low enough for me to miss. "Right up there. 70-foot drop. No one survives that." Roxanne nodded, not turning around. "Good. Let us finish this." My breath caught. The words were confirmation, not suspicion. They were already looking for the spot. I felt the ground shift beneath my shoe, and a small crack echoed as a thin sheet of stone snapped under my weight. It was a small sound, but my training as an emergency nurse kicked in instantly. That kind of crisp fracture meant the surface underfoot was unstable, maybe hollowed by weather, maybe eroded by repeated winds. My instincts screamed at me to move away from the edge. "Can we stop for a moment?" I said, fighting the tremor in my voice. "My knee is freezing up." Roxanne spun around, annoyance sharp in her eyes. "No. Move. You are dragging this out. We do not have all day." I took a hesitant step, and my knee buckled slightly. I reached out to steady myself on the rock wall, but she grabbed my arm and jerked it forward. "Do not cling to everything like you are dying. Just walk." Caleb watched me with his jaw tight, pretending to check his footing while his eyes kept darting toward the edge. He shifted again, placing himself behind me, and the realization struck hard. He needed that position to push. My skin prickled as I tried to calculate any escape, but the trail had narrowed, and the drop beside us yawned open like a waiting mouth. I stepped back instinctively, but my knee screamed. Running was impossible. Even turning risked a fall. Roxanne stopped ahead, and pointed at a flat rock just beyond. "Right there, Caleb. Perfect spot for a picture. Bring her here." Her voice floated back like bait. My heart pounded so loudly, it drowned out the wind. I drew a shaky breath, unsure whether it was a prayer or goodbye. Each step clicked painfully through my joints. Caleb inched closer, his breathing tightening, preparing himself. The wind tugged at my jacket, loose pebbles sliding beneath my shoes as the edge loomed nearer. Then I heard Roxana's voice, silk stretched over steel. "Do it." Caleb's hands touched my back, not gently, not as guidance, but as pressure. Firm, intentional. My whole body locked in instinctive terror. I grabbed for the wall, but the rock was too smooth. My right foot slipped on the loose gravel. A jolt of pain shot up my leg as the knee gave way completely. Caleb pushed. It was not a stumble. It was a shove with full weight. The wind roared past my ears as the world tilted sideways. My hands scraped at empty air. For a moment, I saw the tops of the trees far below, a deep blur of green that seemed to pull me toward it. This was it. The moment they had planned. The moment they expected to bury me in silence. As my body pitched forward off the ledge, one final thought cut through the chaos, bitter and sharp as broken glass. My son wanted me dead. And he believed no one would ever know. The moment Caleb's hands left my back, gravity claimed me. The world flipped, sky turning to stone, stone turning to sky, until everything blurred into a rushing smear of color and sound. I heard nothing except the roar of wind tearing past my ears. The ledge vanished above me. My heart thrashed inside my chest, and for a split second, I had the strange, hollow realization that I was no longer connected to the earth. I was just falling. Then came the impact. Not the final, bone-shattering impact they had planned, but a brutal, jarring slam onto a lower outcropping of rock that knocked the air out of me. Pain exploded through my shoulder, spiderwebbing into my ribs. My vision pulsed in and out, black at the edges. My fingers dug helplessly at loose gravel as small stones skittered over the cliffside, falling farther into the void I had narrowly escaped. A voice echoed somewhere above me, sharp with alarm. "Mom! Mom! Do not move." I blinked several times until the swirling haze cleared enough to make sense of the shape crawling toward me. A man, middle-aged but strong, steadied himself with one knee while pulling a coil of rope from his pack. His tent was pitched just a few feet away on the only semi-flat space the cliff offered. He later told me he had chosen that ledge specifically because it was one of the few stable pockets on that side of the mountain, a place experienced climbers sometimes used when testing equipment. How could anyone have been here right here? He clipped a carabiner to his harness and let the rope fall toward me. "Grab this," he said, steady and controlled. "I have you." My hands trembled too hard to close around it at first. I forced my breathing to slow, forced my fingers to wrap around the rope. The moment I gripped it, he leaned back and braced his heels against the rock, lifting me inch by inch toward safety with practiced strength. My knees scraped the stone, my palms burned, and my shoulders screamed every time I pulled, but I climbed. When he finally hauled me onto the ledge beside him, I collapsed against the rock, gasping. He knelt beside me, eyes scanning me with a precision I recognized, not the panic checking of a stranger, but the calm assessment of someone trained. "Mom," he said quietly, "I saw you fall. Or rather, someone pushed you." My breath snagged in my throat. You saw?" He reached over and tapped a small device clipped to his pack. My body camera was recording, testing new equipment for my daughter. He looked straight into my eyes. "You did not slip." The words broke something open inside me. I shut my eyes for a moment, fighting tears. When I opened them, he extended a hand. "I am Owen Reddick." I took his hand, feeling the solidity of it, the steadiness. "Donna Marsh," I whispered. My son tried to kill me." "I know," he said gently. I saw enough to understand that. He glanced upward toward the ridge. I followed his gaze. From this angle, the trail curved out of sight, hiding the spot where Caleb and Roxanne had stood. They would look over the edge eventually. They would check if I had fallen far enough to be unrecognizable, unreachable, gone. They would find nothing. Owen turned back to me. You are safe with me. But listen carefully. If they think you survived, they may change their story. If they think you are dead, he paused, letting the implication settle. They will incriminate themselves faster than you expect. Should I stay here? Yes, he said, already switching modes from rescuer to strategist. I need to gather something first. He scanned the rocks around us, then moved toward a scatter of broken shale pieces where my body had hit. He knelt, picked one up, and held it near his ear like a seashell. He pressed gently with his thumb, and it cracked cleanly. Hollow fractures, he murmured. Unstable terrain. That will help. I frowned. Help with what? Proving intent, he said. If someone familiar with trail safety knows an area is unstable and guides another person directly onto that area, it becomes premeditation. He lifted the camera again, and I recorded them waiting behind you, watching the edge. A strange coldness crept over me as I watched him work, collecting fragments of evidence with the ease of long familiarity. How do you know so much about this? Owen exhaled and settled on one knee beside me. I used to work as a fraud investigator, he said. Insurance fraud. The same company your son tried to call last month. He gave me a pointed look. Do not worry. Employees do talk. He shook his head, and I recognized the pattern. Desperation, debt, a vulnerable family member, and a fabricated accident. His eyes darkened. It is not the first time I have seen someone try to push a senior off a trail. My stomach twisted. Then what do? We let them think the plan worked, he said, and while they relax, while they celebrate, we collect everything we need. He unfolded a small drone from his pack, clipped a fresh battery into it, and powered it on. A camera lens blinked to life. This, he said, will give us their reactions when they return to the trailhead. He paused. And if they panic and call someone, even better. I stared at him in disbelief. All this was ready? He shook his head. No, but I have learned that evil rarely stays hidden for long. People always reveal themselves when they think they have succeeded. He positioned the drone at the edge of the ledge, then looked at me one more time, softening. Donna, he said, you survived the fall. Now let me help you survive the rest. For the first time since Caleb shoved me, my hands stopped shaking. Owen Reddick had not just saved my life. He was about to expose the very people who tried to end it. Owen guided me carefully into the small alcove just below his tent, where I could rest without being seen from above. He worked quickly, moving with the steady efficiency of someone who had spent years navigating dangerous ground. While he adjusted the drone and checked the footage on his body camera, I tried to steady my breathing. My ribs still ached from the fall, and my shoulder throbbed violently with each heartbeat, but I forced myself to stay alert. Survival demanded attention. Owen crouched beside me. Donna, he said quietly, I need you to prepare yourself. What I am about to show you will hurt, but it will protect you. He tapped the camera and replayed the distant footage. Even with the angle distorted by wind and distance, the image was damning. Caleb hesitating behind me, adjusting his stance, Roxanne watching the edge, their heads dipping toward each other right before Caleb shoved me forward. The force of the push was unmistakable. My own figure tipped over the cliff, arms flailing, and then disappeared from the frame. I covered my mouth with both hands. There was no room left for hope, no place to hide behind denial. My son had done this, my own child, the boy I once carried across burning sidewalks in midsummer because his feet were too blistered to walk. Now he had thrown me over a ledge, as if I were trash. Owen paused the footage and turned to me gently. This alone is powerful, he said, but it gets stronger. He pulled out his tablet and opened a cloud folder synced from his phone. Your son is not very tech-savvy, he explained. His smartwatch was still paired to his phone. When he walked past the trailhead earlier, the device automatically uploaded all buffered audio recordings. He pressed play. Caleb's voice filled the small alcove, clipped and cold. Once she goes over, it will be clean. Insurance will cover everything. You just say she stumbled. Old knees, weak balance. They will not question it. Another line followed, spoken by Roxanne with disgusting confidence. 70-foot drop. No one lives through that. We will get the payout, pay off the cards, and finally breathe. My stomach twisted. It felt surreal to hear their cruelty spoken so casually, so logically, so certainly. There was no hesitation in their tone, no flicker of guilt. They had planned my death the way people plan a weekend errand. Owen tapped again. There is more. He opened an email, forwarded from a contact at his old company. It contained a recording. A woman's voice. Roxanne spoke in her overly polite customer service tone. Hi. I am just wondering, hypothetically, if an elderly relative had an accident while hiking, would the life insurance still pay out the full amount? Even if they had pre-existing mobility problems? The timestamp was 3 hours before the push. I felt sick. Insurance keeps documentation for legal reasons, Owen said. She probably thought she sounded subtle. She did not. He stood and walked to the edge of the ledge. And finally, the last piece. He pointed to a cluster of prints in the dustier part of the rock. Those are fresh, new hiking boots. Men's, size 11. Tread matches the Falcon Ridge model sold downtown. Your son bought those last week. He lifted his camera and photographed them from multiple angles. Most hikers never step this close to the edge. It is reckless unless you have a purpose. Together, the pieces formed a picture more complete than I ever imagined. A mapped-out killing, a financial motive, a staged accident. My fall fitted into their plan like a puzzle piece. It should have shattered me. Instead, an unfamiliar fire began to kindle inside me, warming the parts of my spirit that had been cold for too long. When do we go to the police? I whispered. Soon, Owen said, but not yet. He checked the drone's live feed. The small machine hovered near the trailhead, its camera angled toward the parking lot. On the screen, 2 figures appeared, Caleb and Roxanne, walking casually toward their car. They looked relaxed, almost buoyant. When they reached the vehicle, Caleb unlocked the trunk and pulled out a chilled bottle of champagne. Roxanne clapped her hands together in excitement. I watched in disbelief as they toasted, my death. Roxanne leaned into him and said something, and Caleb threw his head back, laughing. The drone captured every second of it. That, Owen said, is emotional evidence. Juries care about emotional evidence. Before I could respond, he tapped his phone. I am sending everything to the sheriff's department now. Video, audio, footprints, timestamps. My pulse quickened as the message was delivered. 2 minutes passed. Then his phone lit up. They are dispatching units, he said. Your son and daughter-in-law will not leave that parking lot. I stared at the drone feed. Caleb and Roxanne were loading their packs into the trunk when 2 sheriff cruisers pulled in from opposite sides. Their faces changed instantly, confusion, irritation, then dawning fear. Officers approached with hands on holsters. One of them pointed at Caleb and said something firm. Caleb shook his head violently, gesturing up at the trail as if trying to fabricate a new script. Roxanne tried to step backward, but another deputy cut her off. Seconds later, both were handcuffed. Caleb twisted to look up the mountain as if expecting my ghost to emerge from the tree line and condemn him. In a way, I already had. Owen angled the tablet toward me. They are in custody, he said. Your part is done. Now the law takes over. I exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding for years. They had thrown me off a cliff to erase me, but the truth, every cruel word, every calculated step, every arrogant assumption, had become the rope that would hang their freedom. Justice had begun. The weeks that followed felt unreal, as if I were living inside someone else's body, someone else's story. My shoulder healed slowly. My ribs remained tender, but it was the invisible wounds that ached the most. Each morning I woke with a jolt, expecting to hear Roxanne shouting or Caleb demanding something. Instead, the house was quiet and unfamiliar, gentle quiet that felt like oxygen returning to a suffocated room. The prosecutor visited me twice, each time with more evidence than before: the cloud recording from Caleb's smartwatch, the call Roxanne made to the insurance company, footprints, the drone footage of their celebration, Owen's body camera. Every piece fit so neatly into place that even I, who had lived inside the terror of it, felt stunned by how thoroughly they had built their own case against themselves. When the trial date arrived, I sat on the witness bench with my hands clasped together. My palms were cold. The courtroom smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish, and the hum of whispers died the moment the bailiff announced the judge. I thought my heart would climb into my throat when they brought Caleb and Roxanne in, both wearing orange jumpsuits and shackles. For a fleeting second, Caleb's eyes met mine. There was no remorse there, only anger, sharp and wild, coiled like a snake. Roxanne refused to look at me at all. The prosecutor began with the footage from the body camera, played on a large monitor for the entire court to see. There I was, falling from the ledge. There were Caleb's hands shoving. There was Roxanne watching with chilling anticipation. A gasp rippled through the spectators. I felt myself shrinking into the chair, my bones cold, my breath thin. Even though I had lived it, seeing it again carved a fresh line of hurt inside my chest. Then came the smartwatch audio. Caleb's voice echoed through the courtroom. "Once she goes over, it will be clean. Insurance will cover everything." The room stiffened. A woman in the back covered her mouth. Someone whispered monsters under their breath. Roxana's recorded call with the insurance representative played next. Her tone was sugar-coated, polite, almost cheerful, as she casually asked how payouts worked when an elderly person with weak mobility died on a hike. The timestamp glowed on the screen like a spotlight on guilt. Owen testified after that. He spoke calmly, professionally, laying out the evidence with the clarity of someone who had spent his life reading lies and tracing motives. When he described pulling me from the ledge, people turned to look at me with sympathy. Not pity sympathy, the kind I had forgotten strangers could offer. Then came my turn. I walked slowly to the stand, my knee stiff but steady. The prosecutor asked gentle questions, giving me room to breathe. I told the court how I overheard them talking, how I was pushed, how I survived only by chance and the presence of a man who should not have been at that ledge but somehow was. I did not cry until the defense attorney tried to claim that Caleb had slipped and accidentally bumped me. The lie was so thin it crumbled in the air, yet hearing it spoken aloud, hearing them try to paint my near murder as a stumble, unlocked a surge of sorrow so sharp I had to pause. The judge watched me with steady eyes and nodded for me to continue when I was ready. When closing arguments finished, the judge took a long moment before delivering the verdict. The room was silent, waiting, breathing as one. He turned first to Roxanne. "Roxanne Marsh, you are found guilty of attempted murder, insurance fraud, and identity theft." She flinched, as if slapped, but the judge was not finished. "Your actions were calculated, cruel, and driven by greed. You targeted someone vulnerable and attempted to destroy her life for financial convenience." Then he looked at Caleb. "My son, my boy." The judge's voice grew heavier. "Caleb Marsh, you are found guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "Your mother, Donna Marsh, gave you life. She cared for you, raised you, sacrificed for you, and you repaid that gift with a deliberate attempt to take her life. That is an offense this court and any moral society cannot forgive." He sentenced them both to long, unforgiving terms. A strange quiet spread inside my chest. Not happiness, not relief. Something older, deeper. Justice bitter but steady. As officers moved to escort them out, Caleb twisted violently in his restraints. His voice cracked as he yelled, "You should have helped us, Mom. You should have done more." His words sliced through the courtroom. I stood slowly, clutching my cane, and answered with a softness that carried farther than any shout could. "I helped you, your entire life, Caleb, but you never learned how to see it." For the first time since his arrest, he stopped struggling. The truth hit him harder than any verdict. Roxanne hissed something under her breath, but the officers tightened their grip and pulled them both toward the doors. Their steps echoed down the hall until they vanished. Afterward, the prosecutor approached to tell me that all of Caleb and Roxana's assets, what little they had, were being seized for restitution. I would not see a fortune, but justice was never about money. It was about the acknowledgement that my life had value they had tried to strip away but failed. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the sunlight warmed my face, not harshly, but gently. Like an embrace I had forgotten existed. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I thought had died with the shove off that cliff. I felt free. When the trial ended and the courthouse emptied into the cool afternoon air, I realized I no longer feared going home. Fear had lived in my chest for so long that its sudden absence felt like stepping outside after years in a dim room. I breathed in deeply, letting the warmth settle on my skin, and for the first time since the fall, I felt something close to peace. I moved back into my house in Cedar Hill the following week. The front door stuck a little when I unlocked it, the way it always had, and the familiar creak of the floorboards greeted me like old friends. Dust had settled on the windowsills, and the air smelled faintly of pine and age. But the moment I stepped into the living room, I felt a looseness in my chest I had not felt in years. This was the place where I had lived, worked, grieved, and loved. This was where I had carried people through sickness and held the hands of those taking their final breaths. My history was carved into these walls, not for anyone else to understand, but for me. It felt right to come home. A social worker visited me 2 days later with news that made my knees nearly give out, this time from joy. Laurel had requested to stay with me. She did not want to return to the house, where cruelty had grown like mold in every corner. The social worker asked if I was willing to take custody. I did not let her finish the sentence before answering yes. Laurel arrived with a small suitcase and threw her arms around me the moment she stepped onto the porch. "Grandma," she whispered. I knew something was wrong. I just did not know what. I held her tighter than I ever had, promising silently that she would never again have to carry fear she did not earn. We set up her room together, and the sound of her humming as she arranged her books was the most hopeful sound I had heard in months. As the news story spread, the town reacted in ways I never expected. People who had passed me on the street, without so much as a glance, now stopped to speak. Some brought meals, others brought flowers. Many simply offered a hug or a soft word. I had not considered myself brave or extraordinary. I had only survived. But to them, survival made me something worth admiring. They called me strong. They called me resilient. Some even called me a hero, though I never felt like one. I only felt grateful to still be standing. One afternoon, I received a call from the insurance company that Caleb and Roxanne had tried to deceive. The representative explained they were launching a new initiative, a campaign to raise awareness about fraud targeting elderly people. They wanted me to be the face of it. The idea startled me at first. I had lived so long in silence, shrinking myself to avoid conflict, that becoming a symbol felt almost impossible to imagine. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was not about publicity. It was about giving my suffering purpose. If my story could protect even one person from what I endured, then maybe the pain had somewhere meaningful to go. I accepted. Every Sunday, like clockwork, Owen Reddick visited for tea. He never came empty-handed. Sometimes he brought fresh bread from the market. Other times he brought tools to help me repair small things around the house. Once, he brought a new porch light and insisted on installing it himself. He understood silence better than most people I had met. He did not fill it with noise or questions. He simply sat with me, soaking in the quiet, the way one sits beside a river, unhurried, steady, present. One afternoon, as we drank chamomile tea on the porch, he set down his cup and said, "You know, Donna, you have every reason to be bitter. But you are not." I smiled softly, feeling the sun warm my hands. "Bitterness would keep me tied to them," I said. "I survived the fall. I do not need to live in it." He nodded, and for a moment neither of us spoke. We did not need to. There was a comfort in shared understanding, a companionship built not on obligation, but on quiet respect. Owen had pulled me from the cliff, but he had also helped pull me back into my own life. A month after returning home, I painted a small wooden sign and hung it beside the porch swing. The letters were simple, carved with a steady hand and filled in with midnight blue paint. Marsh home, not for sale, not ever. The words felt like a promise to myself, to Laurel, to the life I had reclaimed. As I stepped back to look at the sign, I whispered to the empty air, to the ghosts of fear and betrayal that still lingered in memory, but no longer ruled my days. They wanted me gone so they could take this house, but this house kept me alive long enough to watch justice find them. I touched the wooden frame of the doorway, feeling its familiar grooves beneath my fingers. And now, I said softly, this home belongs to the people who never wished me harm. Laurel called my name from inside, her voice bright and warm. I went to her, leaving the past exactly where it belonged behind me, on the cliff where their cruelty ended and my second life began. Thank you, my dear, for sitting with me through all of this. Some stories are heavy, some are painful, but they deserve to be told because silence is where cruelty grows, and truth is where we finally breathe again. If this story touched you, if you believe that justice, no matter how long it takes, still matters, if you believe no grandmother should ever have to fight alone, then I would love for you to stay with me a little longer. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Here, every whisper becomes a voice, every wound becomes wisdom, and every quiet woman finally gets to be heard. Your support keeps these stories alive. Stories of survival, of courage, of the kind of strength nobody sees until the moment it refuses to break. Thank you for listening. And remember, when a grandmother speaks, the world should listen. Come back soon, sweetheart. I have many more truths to tell.